Good day, everybody. Coach John Meria here. Life coach, study coach, special education teacher, or whatever you want to call me. I'm here to help out middle schoolers, high schoolers, and college students overcome their neurodevelopmental difficulties. And for today's video, I'm going to feature a lecture that I did for the section of the developmental pediatricians at one of the biggest chain of private hospitals here in the Philippines, the Medical City. So it won't be the whole lecture. It doesn't include the question and answer portion, and it also cuts down on some of the cases I discussed for the sake of anonymity or like further anonymity. But other than that, I think that this lecture here, which focuses on life coaching as intervention, should be helpful as well to the majority of you guys. So without further ado, here's the lecture. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is John Meria. I'm from Project Pond. I'm here to talk about life coaching as an intervention. I'd like to thank, first and foremost, Dr. Maria Ranslim for inviting me here. This is such an opportunity that I'm privileged to do because, after this, hopefully, there will be more life coaches and there will be more of you who will be using life coaches to attain to the goals of our beloved clients. Okay? So just to start off things, I want to tell you guys 3 quick stories about me. Okay? When I was in elementary, I was dragged by the ear outside the classroom by my teacher. The story there was that when he dragged me outside by the ear, I don't think he even told me exactly what was going on. I only found out much later on that I was actually noisy, but I was not aware. So therefore, I could not change my behavior. When I was in high school, I relied too much on my listening skills and I didn't really know how to study. The thing is, I would read the books, but I wouldn't really absorb them. I didn't know there would be methods and things like that for me to absorb those types of information. Okay. And lastly, when I chose my college, I chose it solely based on how convenient it would be to travel there. So it took 10 minutes to go to Ateneo de Manila University. But, I had some other options, but I realized Ateneo was a good school for me. Make no mistake about it. Thank God, right? But I think that if I could have done things differently, and if I were to advise somebody from that age, I would advise them differently on how to make big life decisions, okay? So what if there was someone, okay, who set goals with me and thus helped me in figuring out how to overcome the impairment associated with these things. And basically, that type of professional exists now in the form of life coaching. Okay? So our topic today, formally, is overcoming neurodevelopmental difficulties, life coaching as intervention for teens and young adults. Okay? So before we get into the actual topic, I just want to cover this very quickly. The topic of general life coaching. Okay? See, life coaching is now a large industry that encompasses many disciplines, okay? Now there are numerous organizations that locally that offer various types of life coaching, right? Okay? And its definition is also flexible depending on the context. So we're, of course, sticking to one specific definition for this presentation. I remember in 2014 when I was doing a certain portion of my MA level paper thesis, okay? I was bombarded by a lot of information about these different companies. By the way, just a disclaimer there, I never completed my MA. Okay, I understand that there's some controversies lately of people completing their MA because they took MA units. So I'm just going to tell you up front. Yeah, I was doing my paper at the time, but when I was doing it in 2014, right, there certainly weren't a lot of life coaching companies. Today, you'd have these types of organizations. So for example, you have the Philippine Society of Life Coaches, which was established, of course, by life coach, psychiatrist Randy Del Llosa. You have the One Core Business here, which was by Coach Pia Azevedo. You even have church-based programs like Glorious Hope here, which have some very, very specific goals, like overcoming deep-seated things that are spiritual, religious in nature, right? So these kinds of programs exist, and I've had my touch with these programs at some point in time, and they are all legitimate, okay? But coaching, as they define it, tends to be quite different, okay? So the presentation flow we have for today is just for our specific type of coaching. This is for intervention, specifically with our clients who have neurodevelopmental conditions. And then we will be using the basic definition. It's a definition that it's our working definition, and we will describe the intervention through the different portions of how we define life coaching for intervention. And finally, we'll just discuss some of the general processes of life coaching as well as applying it to some cases. Okay? So the earliest reference I could find about life coaching in the Philippines was actually written by Dr. Rose Aligada. She wrote this in a magazine that was published by the ADHD Society of the Philippines in 2010. Rose Aligada defined a life coach this way during that time. It is an alliance between a professionally trained coach and a motivated client with goals and dreams working together in the direction of overcoming challenges. Okay? So, Rose Aligada, who is still a very active individual now, she's a school owner. She's also one of the important individuals in establishing inclusive education in Miriam College. She made a distinction between coaching and consulting as distinct skill sets. What did she mean by that? She meant that coaching itself was basically composed of, say, asking coaching questions, holding them accountable, guiding and traveling together on a journey with that person towards from point A to point B, while consulting is more of like, you have the answer to a specific problem. Like, for example, how do you walk, how do you study properly, how do you read properly, which all, of course, all represent other types of interventions we have in this industry. So in this particular example, I believe that it made this type of goal set distinct. Okay? One of the justifications for life coaching as intervention was actually published by Dr. Tony Atwood. Okay? In his book, he says that the person, one of the success criteria for adults with Asperger syndrome in his book, The Complete Guide to Asperger Syndrome, was that that the person has a mentor. Okay? That is a teacher, relative, professional, or a person with Asperger syndrome, older, who understands Asperger syndrome and provides guidance and inspiration. Okay? When he says that these are some of the indicators, other indicators that he mentioned included the presence of early intervention and also a very supportive family who accepts the person for who that person is. So it's a very big deal to have somebody who is a mentor to a younger person, okay, who has a neurodevelopmental condition. And the first time I actually had an encounter with somebody who did that full time was in 2012. In 2012, this guy, Vicente Rubio, okay, arrived in the Philippines. He's Filipino-American. And he was invited here by the Autism Society of the Philippines, and I had the opportunity to meet with him, to converse with him, to pick his mind just a little bit at that time. Yeah, so I do acknowledge him for this. So he wrote this book, for example, Mind-Body Techniques for Asperger Syndrome. His name here is still Ron Rubio before his name changed. He changed his name to the name of his grandfather, Vicente, later on. And basically he uses his disciplines of Aikido, dancing, and posture, and all of these things that allow a person to get from point A to point B in the process of life coaching. Now, I remember this one moment with Mr. Rubio, right, where we went to the university of a student that I was coaching at that time, and basically he asked that person, very powerfully, what is the one thing you think that would make a difference in your life right now? And the student of mine replied, well, I want to get these pimples off my face. And I thought it was like, wow, okay. So this person was somebody I was handling, I was shadowing in that particular university at the time as a special education teacher and as a coach as well. And what Mr. Rubio did was to bring out a $20 bill and then to say to the student of mine, hey, okay, this $20 bill, okay, I'm going to give to your coach John right here. And then, all right, after this, and then you tell me what you need to do in order to reduce those pimples. I have some suggestions if you want. Okay, so they mapped it out, they talked about it, and at the end of that 2-month period, my student did succeed in reducing the number of pimples he had on his face, and thus winning the $20 bill as well. So I thought that was a pretty powerful moment in which I would encounter the technique of life coaching being applied right in front of me, demonstrated in front of my student. So that was a pretty cool experience, right? So today I want to work with this definition of a life coach. Okay, the person who is a life coach as applied to intervention. And through this definition, we're going to go step by step and talk about the different aspects that make this intervention work in particular. So, an ideal life coach is one who has a background that matches with a coachee and harnesses the independent will of the coachee to get from a defined point A to a desired point B. Okay? First part that we're going to talk about is that first phrase right there, the ideal life coach. So who can be a life coach? Okay, one important thing we have to point out here is this, as I've said, as Rose Aligada pointed out, it is primarily a skill set, and it's acquired through training. In my case, I acquired my training by being apprenticed under Dr. Giselle Bayhon Principe. I owe her so much. She had done so much for my brother, also 9 years younger than me, who has Asperger's, and then she employed me for 5 years. And working under her, she's a clinical psychologist and school owner at the time, primarily for people with neurodevelopmental conditions, really shaped me into who I am now. So it's a skill set acquired through training, certification, and things like that, but you technically do not need a certification or a license to require you to practice it, okay? In fact, the type of individuals who can use this intervention, okay, is varied according to Peg, Dawson, and Dick Ware, who wrote the book called Coaching Students with Executive Skills Deficits. Okay? They say a school psychologist can apply it, a SPED teacher can apply it, a favorite teacher can apply it, a guidance counselor can apply it, an intern, a paraprofessional like a classroom or a personal aide, a trained volunteer, and even another school employee to whom the student feels well connected. Okay? In other words, life coaching isn't that hard. It's actually a very simple skill set that involves a good relationship, but a professional relationship between a coach and a coachee. Okay? So with that in mind, can anyone just be an ADHD coach? Well, the best answer I could find to this statement is this. Okay? Written by McCarthy for Attitude, the Attitude website, which gives information about ADHD. She says that while there is currently no regulating body that certifies ADHD coaches, many well-known institutions have laid out robust criteria for who can be considered an ADHD coach. The ADHD Coaches Organization, ACO, who I am actually conversing with right now, and I'm in the process of being a member in this organization, it vets coaches for proper training before they can appear on its list of professional ADHD coaches. One caveat before you start the search, however. Just because a coach is a graduate of a top program or has multiple certifications doesn't guarantee that he can help you, says the author. Experience and innate ability are more important than formal training and diplomas, and I do agree with this statement. Okay? So that brings us to the next portion of our discussion. So who is the ideal life coach? The ideal life coach is one who has the background that matches with the coachee. Okay, so when you're looking for a life coach specifically for intervention purposes, it's important to dig, to ask specific questions, to find the background and the possible suitability of a coach to a coachee. I remember the first time that I was recommended to coach somebody, and this was the first time the title had been attributed to me. Before that, it was I was more of a young special education teacher at that time, that I just knew that I wanted to specialize in those that have my condition, also my brother's condition. I didn't really think of coaching as an intervention practice at that time. But when I was recommended to do coaching and I asked what it was about, it was basically to guide another student. And this student just happened to be from the same college as I did, had the same condition that I did, and immediately I had a number of ideas already as to what I wanted to do or implement, because we went through the same experiences. We had a very similar profile, so I was very excited to work with that person at that particular time. So these types of questions, finding out these factors that match two coaches together, would be a good thing for professionals like developmental doctors, psychiatrists, and other professionals to ask. Okay, so it was a special education teacher that actually got me to it. Teacher Joy, thank you so much for that. And thank you for changing my life through that referral at the time. Okay, so for example, this is my own sample background. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus. Okay? I'm diagnosed with combined type ADHD, and I have a wife who has the inattentive type ADHD. My brother has high-functioning autism and depression, and I've been helping him for many years. He graduated just a month ago after 6 years, so I'm very, very happy, and that's why I have the time actually to do this today. I am a neurodevelopmental disability advocate. I was on the board membership of the ADHD Society of the Philippines. I have a special education background. Again, completed all my units, almost did my thesis, was disqualified at one point in time. Okay, so yeah, I was mentored by a clinical psychologist, and I love helping individuals mainly with executive functioning because that's my problem. That's the main problem of my brother, and that's the thing I could really relate to. Okay, so when you find somebody who probably has those same bodies of impairments, who has that same empathy for these sort of cases, then it necessitates the idea that it might be a good match. So with that, what does a life coach actually do? Okay, so we're now going to get to the next portion of the definition, the working definition that we have here. What a life coach does is to harness the independent will of the coachee. Okay, so what does that mean, to harness the independent will? Well, let me tell you about the one thing that all life coaching practices agree with, whether it be a corporate coaching program that I showed you earlier on, whether it be some yoga practitioner who applied life coaching principles, or somebody like myself who deals mainly with people with neurodevelopmental conditions. Here's one thing that we all agree with. Life coaching uses the Socratic method. This specific term is cited in the book as well of Dawson and Guerra, Coaching Students with Executive Skills Deficits. This means that we ask a lot of questions. Asking. If there was one action that we did, or life coaches do, it's just to ask questions. Okay? Asking questions, interestingly enough, is a very powerful way of creating behavioral change while working with the will of the coachee as opposed to against it. You see, oftentimes when we impose things to others, it's more likely for them to resist. But when they are under the impression that they are working with their will, and they are, you're not trying to manipulate them, it is truly their will that helps them overcome their difficulties and achieve their goals, then there is that greater impact, or perhaps a greater permanence of positive behavioral change. Okay? And another thing, asking questions builds rapport via cognitive empathy. According to Simon Baron-Cohen, cognitive empathy is the idea of putting yourself in another person's shoes. So we use this specific technique called mirroring, which is also a question. So for example, when a coachee would tell me a problem about his studies, so I'm going to try to rephrase it. So you mean to tell me that you keep paying attention, you try your best, you've been out there for hours, it's 2 a.m. and you feel like you still haven't absorbed anything. And when the other person goes, yeah, that is exactly what I'm experiencing, that is a way to build rapport through empathy. Okay? In that sense also, I know that psychologists watching this would say, isn't that similar to CBT? I believe it is a bit similar to CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, but it is far simpler. And life coaches, I just want to add, are not licensed CBT practitioners. Okay, but I do believe that CBT practitioners are qualified to life coach. Okay, so here are some simple examples of coaching questions. Okay, the most common perhaps is, do you have a goal? Right? Sometimes professionals come in and then they assume already the solution without asking the question what their personal goals are. So sometimes I might think that getting higher grades is a good thing, having higher quality of life is a good thing, going outside to experience nature is a good thing. But if that's not aligned, or particularly in the mind of a person at that time without a goal, then imposing those things, as I've mentioned, might not be as effective. Okay? So you have a goal. What is your goal? And to what extent are you willing to work to get to it? Recently, a student of mine diagnosed with high-functioning autism told me that he wanted to be a lawyer. And I asked him this question: to what extent are you willing to work to get to it? And he says, no, I just usually get by. So, I showed him a few things here and there, like a few cases that lawyers typically study. I told him I don't want to discourage you or anything like that, but actually, as a lawyer, you're going to have to read a lot. He second thought to it, and now he's more committed actually to doing it, right? So but if he said no, if he said like I don't think I want to be a lawyer anymore, that's also okay. At least you're leading them to the reality, right? Okay, not just the dream. Right? So another question is, are you okay with just passing, or would you like to have ways to improve? Okay, some people are okay with who they are, with where they are, so it's difficult to motivate them, and that's okay. I don't think life coaching is for those individuals, but more on that later. Some other questions include, what are your dreams? Have you thought of what you need to do to achieve them? Okay, so based on this logic, coaching then is generally recommended for these types of individuals. Teens and young adults, approximately 12 years old and above. So too young is, their metacognition isn't as developed yet. Their ability to set goals and these things, the fact that they have to be independent hasn't dawned on them yet. So we want to go for the teens and young adults. Okay. So these are also individuals with average or higher intelligence who can converse, who can weigh things in their head, who have working memories that enable them to weigh these things. Those that show desire to improve but fail in their attempts to do so. So they want to improve badly, but they failed and they may be a little bit discouraged. Okay, this is also good for those who want to learn coping mechanisms. Okay, like study skills, for example, and those looking for somebody to look up to as a role model. Okay, coaching is not generally recommended for those who are unwilling or feel like they are being forced to be coached. Okay, so if a child does not seem to want to do it, or if he says no and the parent insists on doing it, I guarantee you that person will not be a good candidate for coaching. Okay, addressing this is also important. It's not for addressing severe mental health issues. For example, there are hallucinations like in people with schizophrenia. This is not to say that life coaching can't work for people with mental health issues. It can, but it's not something that directly addresses that. Perhaps the typical experience I have for people with mental health issues, before they get a life coach, they have to get to a good place first where they're well enough to execute something, at least in the short term or in the medium term. Okay, this is also not recommended for people with an intellectual disability because the complexity of the language and the realizations and things like that oftentimes do not work for them. Although there are a lot of exceptions here. This is not for people who are again too young to practice metacognition, higher order thinking skills. Okay. So there are some things that are specific to executive skills intervention. After all, this is the thing that I have always been concerned with. This is the body of impairment I experienced growing up, right? And my brother as well. And also the impairment that I deal with in pretty much all of my clients. It's an executive skills deficit. So some things here, okay? Due to the nature of executive skills, meetings tend to be frequent while incorporating some daily accountability. So, for example, I meet them once or twice a week, and the days I don't meet them, I give them a call. This daily contact that was designed and asserted by Dawson and Guare in their coaching model is basically that people need reminders and recall in order for them to really remember what they have to do. Because the issue with people with executive skills deficits include like their ability to remember what they have to do and the like. Okay, so the incorporation of proper study skills like learning how to take a test and things like that. And another thing is that it tends to take a long time before the coaching stops due to the late maturity of the frontal lobe in those with neurodevelopmental disorders. I will tell you this. In college, I survived because I became a research assistant because I loved math. But studying the material related to psychology and communications was actually very difficult for me. But I noticed when I finally got to my MA, the subjects were not only so easily absorbed by myself, but I think that it was also because my frontal lobe had matured while in college it had not yet matured as much. So yes, okay, that is a personal experience that I have. Okay? There are some other aspects of the coaching process that I'd like to point out, such as that thing about specifying goals. Oftentimes, individuals who benefit from coaching have goals, but they don't really know how to specify them. For example, they want to be wealthy someday, but what do you mean by wealthy? How much, right? You want to graduate from college, but what course? Do you know what course would be good for you, right? So those are some examples of specifying goals. We also have accountability and follow-up, which means that we draft coaching contracts, that they will post somewhere where they can see it every day, like on their bathroom mirror, as the wallpaper on their laptop or on their phone, okay? Like where they can see it when they wake up in the morning. And I also follow up with them, as I mentioned. There is that idea of coaching calls and things like that when we're not meeting one-on-one, okay? We also determine rewards. So we discuss this with the parents. I've had a wide variety of legitimate rewards, which includes a day out in which we will have a cookout, or a gadget that he really wants, or a trip with the parents somewhere. It really depends on the clients, and it also depends upon how much of a big deal or how much effort it would take to achieve this particular thing, or achieve the conditions on a particular contract, right? Life coaches also provide perspective, okay? So this works because oftentimes when a person with a neurodevelopmental condition, an older one such as myself, meets somebody, let's say in high school and college, oftentimes they feel alone. They feel like they're the only ones who encounter these problems, and all of a sudden they meet some older guy who's already been through that, and then their perspective changes, right? One of the common things I find among people with neurodevelopmental disabilities anyway is that they have low self-esteem while they're in school, but when they graduate and they start enjoying their jobs, they start excelling in it. So it gives them something to look forward to, right? So another thing is about making sense of truth and reality. So oftentimes, individuals with neurodevelopmental conditions as well have goals and things in mind that are not incredibly realistic. So those sort of coaching questions help them face truth and reality, and thereby prevents them also from making bad decisions. Okay? So now let's go on to the fun part of our talk today, which is the case discussions. Okay? So the definition we're working now here is a defined point A to a desired point B. Okay. So case number 1 is Charles, right? So Charles is an 18-year-old male diagnosed in childhood with combined type ADHD, but has since mellowed out and considers himself chill in adulthood. He is currently about to enter his second year of college at the University of Asia in the Pacific, taking up political economy. He is soft-spoken but reasonably articulate and is into writing fiction. During high school, he did not experience symptoms of ADHD to much trouble, leading to his own and his parents' impression that he may have outgrown it. After his freshman year, however, he was called to the university's guidance office and was informed that he needed to improve his grades or else he might be asked to leave the university. Upon investigation of the school administration, they found that the submissions of Charles were adequate to merit a good grade. So there was no problem with his intelligence or his output, but the problem was he was unable to submit a significant chunk of his work on time or even at all. He tries his best to remember these things, but to no avail. Seeking for hope, his parents attended a conference conducted by the ADHD Society of the Philippines. They soon met up with a life coach who recommended to have his executive skills assessed. And after the assessment, they found that the root of the problem was Charles' inability to manage himself independently in college. And the reason why he had no problem in high school was because there was a structure there, and he just couldn't just do the same things he did now that he's in college. So Charles agreed to do coaching sessions to address this. And together with the coach, they set goals by the semester and addressed one behavior at a time. They started with daily calls and weekly meetings in which Charles would recall his classes for the day and write down what they may have missed. So I would ask, so what happened today? What happened in this subject? Okay, did he or she assign anything? So if
this person failed to write it down, at least, yeah, he would be able to remember it in that particular context. Okay. Coaching contracts provided a way for motivation as well as to keep one's goals in mind. Study skills were also taught as Charles gets confused with understanding more complex tasks in college. For example, differentiating between an analysis paper and an argumentative paper. And then they also coordinated with the school and even underloaded units when needed. So Charles decided, also based on conversations with his coach, that political economy was not the right course for him, and he shifted to humanities. Coaching sessions lasted a total of 3 years before they decided to do away with the regular meetups. And still, Charles would see his coach every now and then as needed. And after a total of 5 academic years, plus 1 more semester, Charles graduated from college. So this example is a very, very classic example of how coaching works, why coaching works, the kind of cases that it really works with. When they get to college and the workplace and things are more independent, that's when they sort of need that help, this kind of help. And you can see with his willingness and the fact that he just wanted to graduate, we were able to do so. So yeah, okay. So I just want to say special thanks to all of the shoulders and giants in my life, specifically the person who mentored me in life coaching, Dr. Giselle Bayhon Principe. She's the director of the study center right now. Also working for the UP Health Service, Dr. Alexis Reyes, who's given me a lot of clients, who's trusted me all these years. Dr. Maria Ransom for bringing me here. Vicente Rubio for that moment. Dr. Rosa Ligada, Dr. Rosario Suarez, the first person to employ me as a SPED teacher. And the Nido family for letting me record at their house and giving me chalk nut and flat tops to aid in my hyperactivity to deliver this to you. And of course, my wife, who puts up with me. All right. So these are the references. Okay. So we'll get into the question and answer portion now. Thank you guys, and God bless you.